Yes, it says here I'm to purchase a ticket to Oblivion. Have I got that right? Oh, I see. And the price is civil liberty? Okay. One-way ticket? Well, is that right? Seems geopolitical affairs are being hatched in the spin cycle. Let's see. There is random crisis. Then there's the media-induced panic to respond, followed by a compelling rush to conform without thinking. And before we start the cycle again, we have expanded powers and authorities of the New World Order Empire. Through these sequential and always conveniently spaced cycles, we adjust the grand chessboard, perpetually leaving society on the short end of the stick. Time to analyze the supporting analyses. Hi there, welcome to another analysis of analysis. I'm Mark Seeley. Today we are going to analyze how we analyze geopolitical analyses. We'll take a look at inside the fishbowl, the sufficiency of our storyboard, the one from which we draw the conclusions that are the basis for navigating forward. The fishbowl mainstream media. We'll have a look at our mainstream media using 6 noteworthy geopolitical events for context, and as the train goes off the track there, we'll go for ice cream. Fish and the spin cycle. We'll then have a look at 8 reasons that may explain why we're all satisfied with only vanilla ice cream. Fishbowl democracy. Then we'll analyze our practiced sense of democracy and analyze the prospect that we could be selecting pre-selected leaders. Thinking outside the fishbowl, we'll then revisit those 6 earlier major events to flesh out the practical alternatives to the mainstream narrative. And finally, taking back the fishbowl, we'll wrap up with some conclusions that enable us to correct the lens. Part 1, Inside the Fishbowl. Here we will address, per Pink Floyd, is there anybody out there? Heavy hitters beyond our fishbowl and the organization of these heavy hitters. The peace and tranquility of our fishbowl is often disturbed by events that terrorize the residents, instilling fear and a call to action. But our observations limited to within the fishbowl is sound and sufficient basis for concluding cause and effect. Could there be something outside the fishbowl that is installing an agenda? Well, let's see, maybe. How about Bilderberg? Yes, that's a good one, a heavy hitter. Okay, Jesuits? Yes, another heavy hitter. Freemasons? Wow, of course. How about the Rothschilds? Yes, can't forget them. Rockefellers? Okay, can't forget them. Council on Foreign Relations? Trilateral Commission? Standish Group? Tavistock Institute? CIA? Yes, can't really report on activities with the CIA though. FBI, can't report on them either. MI6, Mossad. How about the City of London? Now that's an out-of-the-park heavy hitter. The Federal Reserve? Woo. Industrial Military Complex? Monsanto? Okay, enough already. The major banks? Big Pharma? Okay, stop. And outside the fishbowl seems to be organized on the basis of political power. We have the seat of temporal power, the seat of financial power, the seat of military power, to form the empire of the state. Now what the hell is that? Part 2, Fishbowl Mainstream Media. Here we will cover the mainstream team, the role of the mainstream media, their very awkward singularity in common across the spectrum. We will break for ice cream and then assess whether anything could be missing from our permitted analytic storyboard that begs the question, are they dealing with a full deck? So your mainstream media comes to its singularities in common based only on entities within the fishbowl. We refer to this herein as Protocol 1 posture, and we will define this and expand on it later. So what is the role of the mainstream media? Here we borrow from the Society of Professional Journalists. As one of society's true professions, journalism purports to be the forerunner of justice and the foundation of democracy, with information that is accurate, fair, and thorough. Ethical journalists act with integrity. Phew, so how do they do that without looking outside the fishbowl? Let's review integrity of analysis, an objective role with a balance of considerations that is falsifiable, i.e. we are searching to be proven wrong, sufficiency of perspective, transparency of source and method, peer review by trusted, neutral, objective authorities. Does this sound like your mainstream media? How do they arrive at this neat response to world affairs? The ones that keep reflecting within the fishbowl? The ones that establish a singular conclusion in common across all the media outlets?
Okay, so we're going to take some protocol readings today. In order to do that, something to do at home. This is one of these, a construction grade level, pretty standard item. You'll need one of these. This is available at any joke shop pretty much, and you'll need one of these. This is the tricorder of the Starship Enterprise.
Forms. You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves, an irrational fear of the unknown. But there's no such thing as the unknown. Only things temporarily hidden.
Okay, Jim, you want to clear the channel? We're trying to take a protocol reading here.
Kirk out.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, so we're going to do a reading to see where we sit. And takes a minute. And yep. So there we have it. That's it. That's a very clear protocol 1. Only protocol 1, nothing but. So let's mark that down. 2 to beam up.
So let's review the mainstream media's track record in some key geopolitical events. The 1963 Kennedy assassination. The immediate and evident problem here is the fishbowl singularity. Oswald, only Oswald, and nothing but Oswald. How about the 1964 Gulf of Tonkin episode? The fishbowl singularity here is Vietnam, sometimes attributed to a U.S. signals mix-up. Vietnam, Vietnam, and more Vietnam. And of course, 9/11. And the fishbowl singularity, 19 Arab hijackers. For the mainstream media, was and forever will be the culprit. 19 hijackers from a cave in Afghanistan. How about the war on terror and the fishbowl singularity, ISIS? Or how about Al Gore's inconvenient climate change agenda? Brought to you by humans. Terrible bunch there. Which brings us to the topic of the day, COVID-19, with the fishbowl singularity nature. Who'd have thought? How about Iran-Contra, Benghazi, Ukraine fiasco, banker bailout, anthrax attacks, Pizzagate, Jeffrey Epstein, race riots, OPEC, the petrodollar, the Federal Reserve, Watergate, Operation Paperclip, Operation Desert Storm, fake news phenomenon, USS Liberty, Oklahoma City bombing, etc., etc., etc. We could go on ad nauseum. Today's mainstream media assumes the role of the thought police. With the train clearly off the tracks, let's go for ice cream. Oh boy, who wants ice cream? Right, what flavor? What do you have? Vanilla. What other flavors? Just vanilla. Guy down the street said the same thing, that's why I came here. Okay, I'll have vanilla.
Vanilla ice cream. It's a bit like trying to write a play without mentioning any of the key players. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but hey.
Not only is the analysis confined to the fishbowl, missing consideration of any involvement of the larger powerhouses on the planet, the messaging is limited to a singularity and is somehow conveniently coordinated across the compendium of mainstream media bazaars, all in violation of sound analytic practice. Part 3, Fish in the Spin Cycle. Here we will try to explain this very strange phenomenon. We will have a look at sociolytics. What the hell is that? The 4 protocols, institutional carve-outs for government, academia, and subject matter experts. We'll have a look at that conspiracy retort, you must be a conspiracy theorist, and we'll peek into the latest fishy fad on the internet, fact-checking. When we analyze our geopolitical events, I take for granted we are seeking the truth. Of course, there is an often invisible and competing orientation analyzing to benefit, which we position at right angles to define the AOAI term sociolytics. A sociolytic is a derivation represented as an analysis where one or more key analytic ingredients are missing, with the intention of selling an agenda. The societal storyboard is replete with sociolytics. Our institutions feed them, we consume them, we enjoy them, and, though they are not truth-based, they often appear to build social harmony. Okay, so I'm throwing a flag on my own play here to make an important point. Though your mainstream institutions wander from analytic integrity, they may do this for a good and noble purpose, to maintain that horizontal vector benefit for society. The public at large cannot be expected to know all aspects of international affairs. None of us can know the sanctionable carve-outs for the clandestine stuff, such as with the CIA. So, though not truthful, sociolytics maintain a social decorum that may be in society's best interest. The notion here is that the truth can be dangerous. However, we must also consider where they take license with the truth. What role is the mainstream media fulfilling, and for whom exactly are they fulfilling it? When we try to separate fact from fiction, the convention is to turn to sources that have both knowledge and experience. Knowledge is our depth of theoretical stuff. Experience is the extent to which the theoretician has gone to hell and back in working the subject. Experts are considered to be those with max knowledge and max experience. As with the job postings and the like, this is the context within which we would like to address the 4 protocols. Let's go for a beer. A man walks into a bar and says to the bartender, "Pardon me, kind sir, do you mind if I poll your patrons for their views on geopolitics?" Things generally go downhill from there. As you talk to random strangers, one can characterize the nature of their perspective to one of 4 protocols. The word protocol signifies that, in their analyses, they adhere to the learned etiquette and limit their horizon of inquiry accordingly. Very loose analytic numbers are as portrayed. Roughly 60% of our barroom friends uphold Protocol 1, 20% adhere to Protocol 2, 15% are Protocol 3, and the remaining 5% are Protocol 4. Okay, so what are the protocols? Protocol is proposed as the 3rd dimension in required rationality: knowledge, experience, and protocol. The suggestion is people can be top of their class in knowledge, have fully gone to hell and back in the real-world experience, but as part of their belief system, will arrive at different conclusions based on protocol. So through this lens, an expert is one who peaks in all 3. This does not suggest all problems are Protocol 4. This simply means the expert is fully conversant with the 4 protocols and is free to navigate through them, unfettered by inhibiting internal neural circuitry. Right, but you still haven't told me what those protocols are exactly. So a Protocol 1 prognosticator believes the official narrative. Here there are no conspiracies of undue influence. Staring at the mainstream media, the event is portrayed as WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. Beyond Protocol 1 are the conspiracy theorists, the analysts that Protocol 1ers love to hate. Protocol 2 prognosticators have lost trust in the system and have latched onto the next horizon, conspiracy of big business, as the answer for the subterfuge at hand. Their universe of considered context extends to add major oil producers, big pharma, industrial military complex, the major banks, and the legitimate clandestine groups CIA, MI6, Mossad, etc., etc. The motivation for conspiring against the sanctity of Protocol 1 is money, lots of it in easy-to-carry bags. At Protocol 3, disillusioned Protocol 2ers see a larger picture breaking through to the next horizon of conspiracy to add the Illuminati, the Queen, and the central families, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, etc., etc. By extension, Protocol 4 is the next horizon, the Vatican. This brings into play the Black Pope, the Jesuits, and the Freemasons, the Empire of the City, and their centuries-old plan to march toward a new world order. The 4 protocols do not establish rights or wrongs. They are simply intended to label and explain the distinction and our self-induced limitation of analytic context. They also appear to define the learning curve of the knowledge expansion. As fish, we jump up the ladder through time to expand our universe of permitted analytic context. Further observation is protection of etiquette. People jealously guard and defend their protocol. Bubbles are not easily burst. If you pressure a Protocol 1 patron to discuss a larger possibility, they turn into a fighting fish and will, quite literally, get up and storm out of the bar. It's not that they can't see, it's that they won't let themselves look. This is an emotionally ingrained response to protect their vested BS, belief system. Now, to save a whole lot of time and confusion as a precursor to anyone's analysis of geopolitics, it is recommended that they preface their presentation with the protocol number they subscribe to. For example, the mainstream media should start their broadcast with, "This is a Protocol 1 news show." In fact, though it might take some buy-in, I recommend each of us nail a number to our forehead to indicate the protocol number that aligns with our mindset, as preposition for any open debate on geopolitical affairs.
Our institutions, those we rely upon for truth and analysis, tend to bend in unison to Protocol 1, placing benefit as the overriding priority.
Of course, governments and their officials are to conduct themselves diplomatically. This is due in part to the underpinning professional decorum. However, the Orwellian newspeak dimension of selling their agenda tends to trump all. Though we have become accustomed to our officials not trying their analytic best, we realize they also represent social interests which can, rightfully, lead them down a path to analyze for benefit over truth.
Mr. Speaker, according to these cue cards in front of me, the public is getting tired of our misleading narratives to sell an agenda. It would seem some 40% are not on side with what we are saying. Mr. Speaker, we either need to silence this minority or change these infernal cue cards. Okay, you got the wrong music playing there. Okay, so anyway, let's take another reading. Check our tricorder. Yeah, so that's Protocol 1, only Protocol 1. Let's write that down.
Academia is an interesting place, often confusing the distinction between what to learn and how to learn. The carve-outs in permitted curriculum are most apparent in the fields of political science, history, and economics. The lack of Protocol 3 or 4 subject matter would seem to suggest the earlier cited heavy hitter entities either do not exist or are inconsequential to affairs on the world stage. Professor, are we going to study the City of London and its power and influence on the economy over the past century? Of course not, you tinfoil hat-wearing ingrate. But don't worry, it won't be on the exam.
Okay, we're going to take another reading. Just got the tricorder. Yep, that's it. That's Protocol 1, right? Protocol 1.
The referent experts. Now, when we cite experts as the voice of reason, we should first frisk them for any obvious conflict of interest. But beyond that, again, we should preface their advice with the protocol number under which they are opining. I have with me a mildly conflicted expert on world affairs who will bring you thoughts within Protocol 1. The conspiracy theorist counteroffensive is a key weapon in the arsenal of disinformation technique. The term is used extensively by those desperately trying to maintain the decorum of Protocol 1. It is synonymous with, we're going to tuck those extraneous details back into conformity.
We won't let you think outside the fishbowl.
And the attendant questions, how many people would have to be in on it? Wouldn't somebody squeal? This is where the protocols provide the explanation and the notion of institutional warpage of knowledge to maintain social decorum. One must consider the implication of forming an allergy to conspiracy. Two or more people working on an undisclosed agenda pretty much encompasses all that is going on around you. Gesundheit. Removing conspiracy removes from consideration most of the good stuff.
One of these days,
Right in the kisser!
Sir, when you're analyzing the international affairs, do you use any terms like Bilderberg Group, Jesuits, Freemasons, City of London, anything? Hello, sir? You know, when you're talking to a sheeple, you might as well be talking to a post.
The fact-check phenomenon. The internet appears to be encountering the same affliction that hit the mainstream media a century ago, an agenda of Protocol 1 narrative management and containment. And another flag on the play. Of course, per James Corbett, one must wonder who is fact-checking the fact-checkers. In my sense, you can't have fact-checking by the very establishment that you suspect is compromised. This would be an analytic circular malfeasance. Are internet analyses destined to become poor sociolytic likenesses of where we are with the mainstream media, following a steered, slow, and steady decay of truth for someone else's benefit? Part 4, Fishbowl Democracy.
Here we will compare inside the fishbowl perspective on the larger management of the public with the outside the fishbowl perspective.
Shangri-La, peace and tranquility of the fishbowl. We the people take democracy very seriously to ensure we select a leader that reflects our interests. Just don't peer above the waterline. Our Protocol 1 doctrine is everyone should vote. It's the democratic way. Our mainstream perspective starts with we the people. Through democracy, one person, one vote, we elect our government. Our government has already selected its leader, which is part of our consideration while behind the voting booth. With respect to geopolitical affairs, our democratically elected leader works with the democratically elected leaders of other countries around the world under the auspices of the United Nations. In that sense, it is our United Nations, a virtuous and noble place, kind of like angels on a cloud, and they all lived happily ever after. Now, unfortunately, there are many powerful groups mentioned earlier that do not factor into our storyboard. In this perspective, we will just refer to that as stuff. Stuff remains disconnected from our bottom-up fishbowl perspective. However, we trust our mainstream media is bringing forward any relevant insights on what stuff means and what stuff is doing exactly. The deep state. What the hell is that? We keep hearing about the deep state, but no one ever puts their finger on it. Well, it starts with stuff. Stuff is the stuff we considered earlier in the presentation, all the heavy power hitters that aren't on our storyboard. Not in academia, not in government messaging, not in our mainstream media. So here, rather than being inspired bottom-up from we the people through democracy, control is administered top-down. The deep state runs the United Nations. The United Nations is the New World Order. Under the auspices of the deep state, the UN collects the world leaders. In fact, the deep state is thought to enable or disable your elected leaders. Our leaders can choose to play along, go along to get along, so to speak. The deep state will make or break tenure with their electorate. It all starts well before election time. It also runs stuff. Stuff works very hard to shape your elections. The deep state substantially controls your mainstream media, which works very hard at managing You. It's still all about you. Well, not really. Everything's little bass backwards. Look up the term fast boating. It may be today's gateway to managing democracy. Part 5, Thinking Outside the Fishbowl. You still haven't defined the deep state. Roger that. So, here we will revisit the earlier 6 geopolitical events. To do that, we need to pop the hood. We will provide perspectives for each of the 4 protocols. Now, as a careful reminder, the 4 protocols themselves don't suggest a right or wrong perspective. They simply reflect alternative, self-imposed boundaries to explanation. Expanding the horizon to the higher protocols brings the deep state into perspective. A beautiful Friday afternoon in Dallas, November 22nd, 1963. I was home from kindergarten when the mailman came to the door to tell my mother our president was shot. We went to the TV, cartoons were canceled Saturday morning, it was very traumatic. Geopolitically, the deep state was dealing with Executive Order 11110, signed by Kennedy in June, essentially to dissolve the deep state's interest in the U.S. Federal Reserve. Kennedy was challenging the deep state's stance on Israel, and for the locals around Dallas, eliminating Kennedy provided the opportunity to reinvoke the oil depletion allowance Kennedy had removed. Seems there is something for everyone. So, in keeping with the 4 protocols, we should have on our storyboard the Protocol 1 perspective, the official narrative. Oswald acted alone. But wait a minute, there's a flag on the play. It seems the Oswald theory requires a rewrite of physics. The number of bullets and what Newton has to say about action and equal and opposite reaction and all that makes this first protocol position rather obsequious. What?
Here we start to see highly unscientific studies being paraded out in the name of science.
At Protocol 2, one could add to the storyboard the oil barons, Murchison and Company, the ones that hosted the meeting in Dallas the night before, the ones that would benefit from the oil depletion allowance, the ones that had influence in town over parade routes and junk. Moving up the ionosphere, Protocol 3, we have the Rothschilds and Company and their desire to protect their interest in the Federal Reserve, assisted by the Rockefellers who have control over the Protocol 2 players. And Protocol 4 brings us to the Vatican. Cardinal Spellman, then Archbishop of New York, the Archbishop that wanted the Vietnam War, the Archbishop that positioned DM in power in Vietnam. That is until Kennedy had DM eliminated 10 days earlier, but I digress. The Warren Commission used Arlene Specter's great magic bullet theory, defined fundamentals of basic physics. They were able to seal the deal for the public at Protocol 1. The Gulf of Tonkin in 1964. This is the USS Maddox, part of the battle group commanded by rock icon Jim Morrison's father. According to publicly promoted initial reports, the Vietnamese fired on this vessel without provocation. The dirty rats. Well, someone needed the Vietnam War, and to be fair, it's hard to start a war without a willing public. Of course, this expanded military spending and that whole Cold War thing. We should start with Protocol 1, the official narrative. The Vietnamese, in a blind aggression, attacked the United States. This was, of course, an act of war that would legitimize expansion of what came to be known as Spelly's War in Vietnam. So, wait a minute. There's a flag in the play. Of course, McNamara later recanted his position. With that, the media that had sealed the deal for the public later reverted to a signals crossed narrative. Of course, not a false flag or anything. It would seem the term false flag is not front and center in the mainstream media's lexicon of terminology. Meanwhile, at Protocol 2, we have the notion that McNamara and the CIA had instigated the situation as a false flag. Protocol 3 indicates the Illuminati with a desire to expand debtors to the Bank of England, and Protocol 4 brings the Vatican into the equation again via Cardinal Spellman with a desire to expand the New World Order. McNamara, Secretary of Defense, having sold Protocol 1 news story, did apologize decades later, and we thank him for that. September 11th, 2001 started as a beautiful summer morning in New York, one that turned horrific, as we all remember. The events of the day led to introduction of the Patriot Act, which ratcheted forward surveillance of the U.S. public, and some would suggest a curtailing of civil liberties. There was the introduction of FEMA and Homeland Security that forever changed the landscape of free America, and of course there was the War on Terror, which provided a virtual carte blanche on PNAC-inspired foreign aggressions. So we start with the official narrative as reported and protected by the mainstream media to this day, 19 Arab hijackers. Oh, but wait, another flag on the play. Who would have thought? Of course, the official story was again not too kind to Newton and the whole physics thing, with 2 planes disintegrating the entire complex, and of course, Building 7 at 4 o'clock that afternoon. The NIST, National Geographic, and Popular Mechanics tried valiantly to tuck the explanation back into Protocol 1. Though maybe socially laudable, this was clearly unscientific. Sorry, no cigar.
Here we see more highly unscientific studies being paraded out in the name of science.
With that, we look at Protocol 2. Here some have hypothesized that certain large companies instigated a false flag to profit from the spoils of war, noting Rockefeller, Silverstein, Securicom, and a few other key businesses were involved in critical precursor activities. At Protocol 3, we have the Illuminati that were assured implementation of the neocons' Project for the New American Century, PNAC, which in turn would reinstill City of London financial interest in payments from those oil-rich nations that were pulling away. How ungrateful. Protocol 4 takes us to the notion that Cardinal Egan, Archbishop of New York, would expand the New World Order while achieving the modern version of the intel-enabling confessional, the Patriot Act, for enhanced U.S. citizen monitoring and surveillance. Thankfully, the 9/11 Commission was able to defy both physics and space-time to sell Protocol 1. ISIS, that brand name brought to the living rooms of America as the mainstream media relentlessly repeated the ISIS soundbite. Charge. At stake was the realignment of the Middle East autonomy and power structure, the war on terror that, in addition to foreign aggression, sharply expanded military spending. So we start our storyboard of alternatives with the first protocol and the official narrative pumped out by the mainstream media. ISIS was the evildoer. I know, there's another flag in the play, of course. We are never sure what ISIS is versus Al-Qaeda versus Mujahideen, and who provided the arms used back against us, etc., etc. Okay, so at Protocol 2, some have suggested it was the U.S. outsourced Blackwater militants and the military companies that profited. Protocol 3 includes the Illuminati pushing further on the PNAC agenda and the interests of the Bank of England. Those oil-producing nations that were turning away from the City of London could be brought back to respect the official international currency. And at Protocol 4, we have Cardinal Egan out of New York and a desire to expand the New World Order. Of course, the world is awaiting word from the former Secretary of State re-clarification of her Protocol 1 stance and any potential links between Benghazi and the supply of arms to ISIS. Climate change. Now, if you put a word counter on that term climate change, pumped out by the mainstream media, the story here starts with Al Gore. Until the inconvenient truth was inconveniently pushed out from the UN, we were perhaps becoming complacent with our existence and running out of centrally inspired problems. At stake was, of course, the carbon tax, perhaps the cleverest approach to bleeding money from the masses. Our forebears would be having a great laugh on this one, and of course it provided the basis for ratcheting forward central UN powers and authorities with freshly minted international law. Protocol 1 is, as Mr. Gore would persuade, humans. We are the authors of our own demise. We are doing it to ourselves. Oh, a flag in the play. Who would have thought? Okay, so Mr. Gore's hockey stick curve featured a little self-serving statistical sleight of hand. But I think we will all agree that most humans have a tendency to leave a legacy of planet decimation in their wake. The voice at Protocol 2 points to the environmental industry and the notion that those that benefit from the climate change-inspired flow of money have exercised a bit of puffery to get the public in a frenzy and thereby turn on the financial taps. Protocol 3 points to the Illuminati, the desire for carbon tax control and influence. Protocol 4 points to the Vatican, intention to expand UN authority and the New World Order.
Okay, so Mr. Gore's hockey stick curve featured a little self-serving statistical sleight of hand, and with that, we see more highly unscientific studies being paraded out in the name of science.
COVID-19. Politically, this stands for Coronavirus Disease 2019. Scientifically, it is SARS-CoV-2. In terms of geopolitical power shift, this is likely the greatest of successive shifts to United Nations power and authority since the World Wars. In the sequence, we include the 1920s attempted installation of the League of Nations. At stake, we have global civil liberties, the notion of contact tracing and required passport to go out in public, permission to join a group, an obligatory regime of vaccinations, which we will be ingesting while we discover what they are made of, eventual RF chip installation, and technology that, to function without interference, requires the 6-foot social distancing that we have become accustomed to. Also at stake are the Center's continuity of Agenda 201. Maybe I'll stop there. Hypotheses on the storyboard should include the Protocol 1 prospect that this COVID-19 came from nature. This would be consistent with the Spanish flu, the bubonic plague, and many other maladies that humans have confronted, that have propagated in nature long before there was a central governance regime. Right, I know, a flag in the play, yowza. What? Statistics. The central-inspired statistical formulae drive the politics. Comorbidities, financially incentivized treatment regimes coupled to the probability of false positives means the more you can test, the more you can claim. Tested enough times, we will all be confirmed as COVID positive.
This is the latest in the highly unscientific studies being paraded out in the name of science.
The Protocol 2 voice focuses on big pharma and the opportunity to capitalize on vaccine sales, harvest of patent investments, and associated government funding. We should note public money is flowing out of the door hand over fist, which is furthering the Protocol 3 agenda, but hey, I'm jumping the gun. Bill Gates. So, Protocol 3 looks at the Rockefeller Institute's 2010 game plan, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, that, in addition to the U.S. administration, underwrite the financial sustainability of the World Health Organization, as they have thankfully invested in the solution technology on a just-in-time basis. So how do Protocol 4s factor in? Well, a Vatican desire to expand the UN control and surveillance, a Patriot Act on steroids for the international community.
The point concerning COVID in particular is not to remove properly motivated precautionary measures, but rather to add to consideration the further context of what may be going on around you, to add missing pieces to the puzzle, to ensure a balanced analysis in support of more fulsome strategizing.
And the WHO, under Dr. Tedros, on behalf of the UN New World Order, moves to sell the Protocol 1 narrative while requesting a side order of centralized control grid. Meanwhile, President Trump is walking the line to ensure his election opportunity for the second term. In the fight for control, this is the inevitable result: depopulation. Following transition to an international dollar, Part 6. Taking Back the Fishbowl. We have talked about societal perspectives being substantially limited to inside the fishbowl and the carve-outs of known to be major players in the power structure. We reviewed the singularity and common phenomenon of our institutions, including our academia, our government, our mainstream media, and their cited referent experts. And we have characterized them as perhaps promoting agenda-based sociolytics that are adrift from analytic integrity. We have introduced the elements of the outer power structure and added them to the hypotheses to develop a basis for more fulsome dialogue on world events through the 4 protocols, essentially correcting for the institutional carve-outs and enabling us to approach a definition for this elusive deep state. We have characterized the 4 protocols as a learning curve of expanding horizons of permitted thinking. To jump up the curve, I recommend you look back at your history, not the one you were taught. Look across the functional domains, environmental, health, economic, and military, that are coincidentally ratcheting control forward around you. Reflect on human nature and the age-old ambition for control. The deep state is the mosaic of clandestine power structures that have evolved through 2 millennia. A few of the key constructs and their initiation in global governance are provided in the 2 tables. These are recommended as study material for orientation on the higher protocols. The New World Order is exemplified through the United Nations that is expanding its turf at the expense of domestic autonomy. We should consider whose United Nations is it? This slide provides the sum total of the deep state players reviewed by your mainstream media. The missing power structure is not consistent with the certitude of the media's posture in its singularity and common messaging, suggesting an agenda of thought persuasion beyond common sense and beyond the calling of a professional journalist. We reviewed 6 sample world events and have proposed expansions to the conspiracy theories that feature the prospect of a centralized agenda versus the mainstream series of standalone random events. And we have reviewed the purpose behind the allergy to conspiracy theory to suggest this pronouncement is a tactical analytic malfeasance. With greater controls being installed on the internet, persuasion of sociolytics over bona fide analyses appears to be the trend. As we have a lot of bubbles to burst, deprogramming one person at a time, you have the opportunity to think beyond convention. You need to ask yourself, is all of this being done for you or to you? Before we close the book on this thought, it is important that we consider the motivation of central authority. Some would argue the notion that society, left to manage itself, under the idealistic notion of self-governance through democracy, would not be sustainable. As democracy is an experiment that has never been truly tried, perhaps the guiding hand of central rulership has been essential to sustaining the societal quest for prosperity. I know.
You can't handle the truth!
As we approach the intense ratcheting under the current pandemic that is planned to be fortified through 2nd and 3rd waves, society may be taking the greatest jump forward in its history, walking into the light of central control. While programmed mainstream media heightens fear and the desire to leap before thinking, the implications to your civil liberties will be irreversible. In the end, you can choose to be socially collaborative or analytically correct. It may not be an easy choice, but it's your move. I hope that the taxonomies provided herein may render discussions ahead more efficient. AOAI supports the quest for integrity and analysis. Best of luck in your analytic pursuits. Until next time.
This is a pre-boarding announcement for COVID bandwagon SARS-CoV-2. Please prepare your mind for boarding. The bandwagon to oblivion will be departing reality in 20 minutes. Doors will be locked once all souls are on board and your possessions are safely secured with the bags. You are reminded that this is a one-way trip only. There is no return. Those not boarding the bandwagon are welcome to join a reception to be held on the tracks in front of the train prior to departure. Thank you for using United Nations bandwagons.
That's mine. I better go. Thanks very much for watching.
said the mama fishy, swim if you can. And they swam all over the dam. Did-em da-da bottom. Did-em da-da bottom. Did-em da-da bottom. And they swam all over the dam. Stop, said the mama fishy, or you will get lost. The three little fishies didn't want to be bossed. The three little fishies swam off on a spree, and they swam right out to the sea. Did-em da-da bottom. Did-em da-da bottom. Did-em da-da bottom. And they swam right out to the sea.
Is everybody here Protocol 1?
Yeah, much better. Definitely.